bucka. Ha. You know the deal.
Next thing we're going to talk about in angle relationships is angles in algebra. And really what we're going to be talking about here is using the angle relationships to write an equation. So oftentimes you're faced with the question where there's some algebra involved in it that uses the angle relationships. So in our first example, we go back to the initial video where we talked about what angles were and angles on straight lines, as well as opposite angles and supplementary angles. So here you can see we have a pair of opposite angles. And as discussed in that first video, opposite angles are always the same. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use this angle relationship here to write an equation. So we can say that this angle is the same as this angle. Well, the symbol, the mathematical symbol that we use for the same is equal. So if we want to write that relationship as a math sentence, we can say that 2x plus 5 equals x minus 3. And now we have an algebraic equation that we could solve. And again, I'm not going to go through all the steps of solving this equation here. If you need to, you can go back and review the videos that are in the algebra playlist. But essentially here, you know that the goal here is to isolate x. So you have to get all the x terms to one side, all the number terms to the other side, and get x by itself. And that's pretty much it. So again, with these, when you bring algebra into these angle relationships, you're just using the angle relationships to write an equation where you can solve the unknown variable. And here's another example. This time we've got a pair of parallel lines there with a transversal in between them. So we know from one of the previous videos on parallel lines and angles that when we stay inside the parallel lines on the same side of the transversal, the relationship between those two angles is that they're supplementary. So that means that if we add the two angles together, so 3z plus z, it has to equal 180 degrees. So once again here, we use that angle relationship to write an algebraic equation where we can now solve z. And once we solve z, we can actually solve what those angles are. So if you went ahead and solved that algebraically, you would find that z is equal to 45 degrees, which means that this angle down here is 45 degrees because it's just z, and 3z means 3 times z. 3 times 45 is 135. So that means this angle up here is 135 degrees. And we can see that 135 plus 45 is 180. They are supplementary. So to finish off our lesson on angles in algebra, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of questions here. So just like with the previous examples, use the angle relationships to write an equation first, solve the variable, and then also solve what the actual angles are here. So we've got a couple of things going on there. In the first question there we have a triangle. In the second question we have a pair of parallel lines and two angles where we cross the transversal, staying inside of the parallel lines. So once again, use the angle relationships to write an equation, solve what x is, and then state what the actual angles are here, all of the angles in each of these pictures. If you're able to do that, congratulations, you now have a firm understanding of algebra and angles.